I think Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would have been more ashamed of the leaders of today than of his time. The reason is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was about peaceful protests and being nonviolent. Today, it's like the total opposite. And the leaders, the ones that our youth is supposed to look up to, is seeing grown-ups saying, attack somebody because they don't agree with you. Destroy this business because it's privilege or it supports a different political association or affiliation, um, or just hurt this person because they're a part of a different group or celebrate a different religion, whatever have you. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was about bringing people together from all walks of life, from different backgrounds, and more. And to know that these leaders are so disrespectful to use his name after basically saying they keep up with the rioting, keep up with the looting, keep up with the killing, and more. Don't ever use his name for that. Um, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't even care whether you was Democrat or Republican, even though he was Republican. The fact of the matter, it was about doing the right thing, even though at time frames it wasn't favorable to certain people's opinion. It was still about doing the right thing, regardless of the controversy. So when I see people all over TVs and vice versa talk about, especially now in 2021, about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and how how he had this effect on their lives, my question would be to them: are you still living out his dream, or are you living out your own dream? Even as leaders, wrong is wrong. Injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in most of his quotes didn't say it's okay because of somebody else's race to do so. It wasn't okay because you was a part of this political party. The whole point is do what's right. Even though it may be controversial, you gotta remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Marched over Selma Bridge, you know, and throughout his life was attacked by dogs, water hoses, police, people who did not want to see people come together. And if you look at what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. went through, and for him not to throw a punch, even though he wanted to, but to be there with his fellow brothers and sisters, it was black people, it was white people, it was Puerto Rican people, all marching with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and going through what he was going through. And the message was clear that more could be done through peaceful protests than it ever could be done through rioting. And he did acknowledge the rioting is the voice of the unheard. But he never said rioting was the right way to handle things. He only said that rioting happens when leadership continues to do wrong. And that is what's happening today. We are starting to see people from all over lose faith in what America has become, and now they are more on. Most people don't trust anybody. The fact of the matter is, when the devil is roaming around, this is what happens. But I tell people, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a strong man of faith, and he always believed God would make a way. And he said he was going to be at the mountaintop. He may not get there with you, but he can see the promised land. And it's about time that we all wake up and fulfill Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream, and also fulfill our own dreams that we will see the promised land in our lives. It is our choice to see hell or to make it to heaven. Regardless of who you are, you can still walk this great earth thinking you're the King of Kings. God is the King of Kings and will break you down. So that's why it's better to do right and stay far right than to accept wrong. The reason is karma has a way of catching up to you. And you don't want to think about what you did years ago will come back to your present moment where you're trying to make that turn for a better life and then want the peace and the nonviolence that you denied somebody else. What makes you think that somebody else will give you that same courtesy? The fact is, if you believe in Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his dream, you will understand that the leaders of today, you will know clearly who not to listen to, and those who to listen to and follow. Because leadership is not about making sure they stroke your ego. It is about making sure the right thing is done regardless of the circumstance. That was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream. That was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s life. And when somebody comes to you that encourage or promoted or excuse wrong, you will then